Today on the TMZ Podcast.
Welcome to the TMZ Podcast. Derek and Jason here.
Derek, Kanye West is at it again, this time going after Kasper Rørsted, the CEO of Adidas. He's had a long-standing beef with Adidas, obviously a long partnership as well that made gobs and gobs of money for both. But now they've pissed him off a few times, and he, on the heels of going in on the Gap board of directors and their apparatchik, he's now going after Adidas. What is going on with this guy?
Yeah, the calm Kanye waters are roiling again, is what I would say. These things happen in fits and starts. Kanye has been pretty quiet after the Pete Davidson incident. He went after Pete very heavy. He gets into these rants and these periods where he goes on Twitter and just starts obsessively sort of tweeting lots of different things. I think he's getting into one of those. This one is about Adidas. The one that fascinated me was that he took on all of Gap. These are his partners.
And that one wasn't on social media. He was face-to-face with them. It wasn't sort of behind everybody's brave on social media. He got in front of this sea of Gap executives, people that are trying to save this dying company, and just ranted at them.
Yeah, and look, Kanye is very important. He's obviously a guy who moved a lot of shoes. He is a brand ambassador. He's very creative spirit, but Gap is a big, staid, old company that moves a lot of khakis. And I don't think Kanye really understands where his placement is in the company necessarily. I think you disagree with this, but Kanye West is not a savior of necessarily Gap. Gap is certainly considered a dinosaur in some respects, but it's massive. It's a multi-billion-dollar enterprise that is doing a line with Kanye where they brought out some garbage bags and he's trying to sort of inject some energy into the brand. But I think the Gap doesn't need Kanye West. You disagree with that, or you look very skeptical?
Oh, I totally disagree with that. I think the Gap, we all know the Gap is a dying company, literally dying, in that it's closing stores left and right. It's hemorrhaging money. All of its quarterly reports are disastrous. Its stock has gotten hammered.
But do you think they would just yield and let Kanye West hijack the company and do with it what he wants?
They certainly don't want to, but I do think he was used the term savior. Maybe he was their lifeline, right? He was sort of the thing that they hoped would raise from the depths, just to use metaphor after metaphor, raise from the depths this once grand company. When I was a kid, and even when you were a kid, right, this was the biggest and the baddest of clothing makers.
Oh man, I'm back to school week. You would go to the Gap and you'd get a bunch of new outfits.
But not just anecdotally, it was also a trendsetter, and it was all over. Every commercial was the Gap. Whatever, but now it's clearly not what it once was, and I think they were looking at Kanye to pull it to
revamp
pull it up,
the preppy brand that Gap was, and let him just sort of take it over.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, no. The last part, obviously, they didn't want to do, but they certainly knew when they were getting into bed with Kanye West, you take the good, you take the bad, right? He's obviously a brilliant designer. More than being a brilliant designer, he is the most famous designer in the world, not even close. And he has the influence to elevate a brand in a way that Gap desperately needed. So I have a feeling, we haven't seen the contractual documents, it's not public, that they ceded a lot of power to him. And when they start making decisions that aren't consistent with him, he gets mad and he says that is not what I expected.
Yeah, I think there could be a genuine sort of lack of meeting of the minds about what this relationship is. I think of Kanye West as a glorified, and this is going to sound belittling him, but like Kathy Ireland did a line at Kmart, and it was huge in its day. You remember when Kathy Ireland?
Of course.
I thought they were bringing, and I think some of the Gap executives maybe thought, hey, we're bringing in Kanye West to inject some energy, bring in the youth because he has some cool ideas, to do a line at the Gap, but not reinvent the Gap whole cloth. I mean, maybe they are now sort of blanching at the idea of, what did we bring in here? We brought in a monster who's now trying to sink our company rather than help us. I think this could be like a sort of a fraught relationship that they maybe just want to distance themselves at this point.
Just to give this a little color, and then we can lead back into the Adidas mess now. So they had what he was so upset about is that Gap apparently had held some meetings without him, and one of the products of that meeting was that he had accused Kanye had accused Gap of copying Yeezy's Gap and to create some. Kanye had created something for Balenciaga, a design. He accused the Gap of trying to copy that design for their own purposes.
Even though he's working with them and their business partner, maybe they weren't working on that particular line.
But they had meetings about this. He wasn't invited to those meetings. The Gap people are like, "What are you talking about?" To your point, what are you talking about? We appreciate what you did, but we're still a company that can do other things that aren't Kanye, and
Yes.
you might think they look like him. We certainly weren't copying anything, and Kanye doesn't take well to those.
And
kinds
if
of
you were guessing who's laboring under the misapprehension of the business relationship, who would you say? Is it the
It
state
depends how you look at it.
Gap
Depends how you look
executives
at it.
or Kanye
Depends
West?
how you look at it. Clearly, Kanye is overstating his authority in all these places. I think we know that to be a fact. But when I look at the Gap, I'm like, you knew who you were getting in bed with.
Fair
you
point.
knew that this person was going to try not just to get what's on paper, but everything else that comes with it.
Yes.
And I really
He's a
do
high
believe
risk, high reward
it's sort of-
proposition to work
if
with.
you date Halle Berry, you get the benefit of
Right.
being with one of the most beautiful women in the history of the world.
Yes.
You also know she's a little nutty. We've seen enough evidence of it to know that she's a little nutty. So when things go south, don't come and say, wow, I really thought that was going to end well. We know that that's not.
You can't act surprised when we say take the bitter with the sweet. There's going to be some bitter. I mean,
Right.
Kanye is a known sort of entity at this point. He is erratic. That's part of his sort of creative drive and appeal.
And why he's able to sell so much product. But now he's
When it
doing the
goes
same
sideways.
thing with Adidas as well. I guess a month or so ago, he was very upset because Adidas released a slipper that was similar to his design. He felt, and I actually looked at it, I thought it was really similar to his design. But I think Adidas,
enough.
when they got Kanye on board, thought, oh, we now have the right to do this. It's part of the value proposition for them is not just to give take what he gives us, but to build off with derivative products that will also sell so everybody gets more. Kanye says, not so fast.
At least not with having me at the board meetings or
Right.
wherever he wanted to go to.
And-
Kanye's a strange person in a lot of ways because why he wanted to be invited to all of the Gap meetings, which I'm sure involve complicated financials that he's uninterested in. I'm sure this meeting was not designed to have Kanye West, but he thought, you left me out of it.
Right.
And I want to be there. And
So-
that's all that matters.
So now with Adidas, he put on social media a fake New York Times headline, which said that Adidas CEO Kasper, I think it's pronounced Rørsted, died at the age of 60. Kasper Rørsted is alive, well, quite fit as a matter of fact. And
Kanye loves doing this. He did an obituary for Pete Davidson.
For Davidson,
so
right? This
he
is
likes
his way
putting
of
fake
saying.
death out there.
This is his way of saying you're dead in my mind, and therefore you're dead to the world.
But to the broader point is what's going on with Kanye West, and is this sort of a prelude to one of his longer episodes where I don't know who his next target would be. These all seem business related, so I'm not yet ready to say that he's just going to go on a tear. It doesn't seem to be in the personal sphere with Kim Kardashian, but these things have a tendency to proliferate with him.
So we've seen this a couple times before, right? We saw this most recently with Pete Davidson and Kim, where he could not stop saying awful things about Pete Davidson and Kim, threatening in sort of thinly veiled terms, threatening Pete Davidson's life.
Yes.
Really raising the specter that people who are followers and people allegiant to Kanye might do something really bad. I think Pete was worried for a while.
But then it stops.
But then
someone
stopped.
must tell him, or the
I don't
episode
think anybody
runs.
tells anything. I think if the episode runs or whatever, he has said in the past, including here within TMZ's walls, he said in the past that he has gone off of his medication, which destabilizes him. He hates the side effects of the medication, which everybody can understand. These are drugs that affect the brain.
And he feels they dull his creative vision
Exactly.
and so forth.
He's gone on and off of his medication. We have no idea if that's at play here. But I do think that the incredible perseveration over Pete and Kim that he had for a long period of time that suddenly turned off. What turns a person like that off? I don't think it's a good talking to, right?
No, I think that does just the opposite. When people try to counsel him, I think it tends to sort of worsen the situation with Kanye. So it's a difficult problem. When the episodes sort of start running, I think people need some tools for how to handle it, how to make it sort of run its course most quietly. But it remains to be seen. I think this could be the start of a longer episode, so we'll have to wait and see. But let's shift gears a little bit. Let's move to Britney Spears and Kevin Federline.
Are we shifting gears? Or are we?
Yeah, I don't know. We're sort of in the same
We're still
milieu
in
in
third.
some ways. But Kevin Federline, this has been fascinating. So during the entire sort of conservatorship episode and Britney sort of dismantling the conservatorship is over, Kevin Federline has sort of stayed on the sidelines for the most part. Her crosshairs were firmly on Jamie Spears. She then shifted her target to her own mother and said Lynn Spears was sort of complicit in all this, and I'm actually more mad at her than I ever was at my father, who this is more par for the course. He was always this kind of father, a control freak. Well, now when she brought her kids into the mess and said, look, I haven't seen my kids, and basically went on a rant expressing that they were ungrateful, I think was the nature of the rant. It's like, I have these 2 teenage boys who won't listen to me and I demand respect. And she was very, very frustrated in a public fashion. That's when Kevin Federline got involved. Kevin Federline then ran to his son's defense and said, listen, yes, they haven't seen their mother in months, and there's a reason. And he put out these videos of Britney sort of chastising her son, some personal videos, and he's still out there in public. Now he's done this interview with 60 Minutes where he's expressing more broadly.
60 Minutes.
Australia. Yeah, sorry. 60 Minutes Australia, the down under version.
Yeah.
So he's expressing more broadly what he thought of the conservatorship, because we really haven't heard from him. He has played it sort of tight to the vest. And what he said was he was mortified that it happened.
Yeah.
I mean, even though they were exes at that point, this was an embarrassing episode. He definitely felt bad that it was happening to Britney, because he obviously had strong feelings. She is the mother of his children. But he said that he had to really look out for the boys during all of this, because she was not in a good state of affairs.
I can't tell exactly what he's saying he was mortified about. Was he saying he was mortified about the fact that she acted so poorly that she had to go into conservatorship, or that a conservatorship was imposed upon her?
I think he was general. My read of it, and we'll have to see sort of all we've seen so far is teasers of this, but I think what he's saying is this episode is a sad thing for anyone to go through. Whether or not it's merited, I don't know if he'll get into more depth about that. My sense from the situation is that he thought the boys needed to be protected and someone did need to intervene. So I don't think he was against the conservatorship at its inception.
Yeah. So they still have teenage boys, 15 and 16. 16 and 15. It's Sean and Jaden. He has expressed for recently that he's very worried about them and he's trying to protect them. And basically that's his entire sort of reason for being at this moment, is to protect these kids. It must be very difficult for these kids to watch their mom, even now, right? Because if you watch her social media stuff, it seems, I don't want to characterize it. It comes off as being a little bit wacky.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably embarrassing for them. I wouldn't be surprised. Kids are mean to each other, and I wouldn't be surprised if they pay some sort of a price, a social price for these antics. Obviously, she's also insanely successful and wealthy and all those things.
Well, that's a huge part of it. She has a huge platform to express herself. She's got millions, tens of millions of followers on all of Instagram, and she goes on a rant against her kids. It frames them in a certain way to the public.
Yeah.
And maybe the public is inclined to say, oh, these kids do sound like ingrates, so it would be great to have Britney Spears as a mother. And Kevin seems to dive into the fray saying, look, I'm their father, and here's the counterpoint to that. It seems like the impulse of a protective sort of father, because the boys are really sort of, they don't want to, I think, be publicly against their mother, but they need someone to defend, their position in all of this if they haven't seen their mother for months. It's a very sad situation to see these sort of domestic squabbles on such a public stage, I find.
Yeah. What happens to K-Fed once these kids move out of the house and the child support payments stop?
K-Fed's a survivor, man.
Yeah.
I think K-Fed is like a hustler.
Yeah,
I think
he'll
he'll
be fine.
maybe get back in the studio, do
He'll be
Popo's
fine.
Out Part 2. I think everything will be okay.
So, Derek, we want to transition to sex.
All right, let's do it.
Sex at baseball games in particular. We've had 2 incidences recently. It is.
I mean, no pun intended, but there's a rash.
Hopefully not a rash. We had 2 incidents. We had 2 people in the stands at an Oakland A's game very recently who were seen. She was seen providing
very sparsely attended. We should
very
note at the
sparsely
outset.
attended. And there's a couple, a man and a woman, and the woman is performing fellatio on him up in a distant corner of the stands. There are some adults within maybe 200 feet of them.
Sure.
It's hard to not know that kind of thing is happening, right? You
Yeah.
just sort of sense it behind you.
You sort of have a sixth sense, or a spidey sense. The hairs on the back of your neck start standing up. Yeah.
So she's performing fellatio on him in a corner of the stadium. We'll talk about the investigation into these people and the attempts to arrest them, I guess, for this. This follows on the heels. A couple days ago, we had 2 people in the stands at a Blue Jays game up in Toronto, those wacky Canadians, right?
Yes.
And they're having sex. She has her pants down around her ankles, and
man on top of her thrusting away.
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, you have to describe what it is.
Do you?
We
Sex
just did.
wasn't enough. But anyway, so in the Oakland A's situation, cops are investigating this?
Yeah, cops are investigating. Look, this was it was a thinly populated game, but this is still a lewd act in public. public.
Yes.
And baseball games are obviously family-oriented activities usually. There could have been kids around. Again, there were not. So I see this issue a little bit differently than if it had been sort of a crowded game and they were having sex.
Yeah.
But the cops are taking it seriously. They released a photo of who they suspect was the couple engaged in the act in the stands. And they're saying, look, contact us if you know this couple. We'd love to sort of book them and charge them, I think, as a deterrent. I think people are, you're inclined to see this as sort of a joke, but the cops don't see it that way.
So you and I talked about this earlier, and I took one position, which is, well, they're sort of overstepping. What do we really care that much? I've thought more about it, and I think I've changed my mind.
Okay.
And the reason is this. In the social media world, it's not just sort of videos that go viral. It's activities that go viral, and people emulate them. And I can see...
We call it clout chasing.
Clout chasing. I can see that if we don't sort of stamp on this, right? Stamp down on it, that we're going to have a rash of people... having sexual relations in the stands.
When you were a kid, it was a little like the streakers. Remember, they would turn the cameras off.
True.
And the idea was, obviously, a streaker is so exciting, they would initially keep the cameras on the streaker, but then they wanted to deter the activity. They said, they want to be seen, so let's turn the cameras off.
So we had streakers in the 70s, and all the way until now, we have these drunk fools who get out of the stands and run across the field or the pitch in soccer, right, and are taken down. And yes, they're arrested and ashamed and embarrassed, but at the same time, they've made the news and they watch their buddies, and their buddies go, ah! Can't you see that same thing happening with people having sex in the stands?
I agree completely. And now you no longer need NBC to turn off his cameras for a streaker. Now anyone with a cell phone makes these videos go viral. So the only recourse is to have them sort of criminally held to account and punished for this behavior. Otherwise, it'll just become rampant, right? We saw two of them. You're going to see, sort of hundreds of them potentially, because games are thinly attended. Baseball is sort of a dying sport. Oakland games aren't going to get more people in the stands, so I think you would see more sex.
I think you're right. I think it's going to be. I think it's a rash of sex. I go back. I bristled at your use of the word rash, but I think that's exactly what it is. It's a rash. It's a monkeypox of sex. I think.
It's a full breakout. So yeah, I think we're on the same page. No more sex in the stands. Or if you are having sex,
I'm
in the
not
stands,
saying don't have sex in the stands.
Yeah.
You're just going to have to suffer the consequences if you do.
That's it. You got a criminal record now, but maybe it was worth it. Depends on the sex.
We want to close out with something very exciting that TMZ is working on. This is literally 13 years in the making. We are launching a new documentary. It's going to air Tuesday at 8 p.m. 7 Central. TMZ Investigates Who Really Killed Michael Jackson. This is something that the entire office has been working on for months, and like I said, 13 years in the making. I had been here for 3 months. It was June 20th, I believe, 2009. Michael Jackson died. We broke the story, one of the biggest stories the TMZ's ever broken, one of the biggest stories in news for the decade, maybe.
Yeah.
And we've done a full investigation here, and the what we've seen is wild.
Yeah, and look, if you were to ask people who killed Michael Jackson, 9 out of 10 people would tell you Conrad Murray, right? That's the story that everyone believes.
He was convicted of killing him, of homicide.
The single name associated with the death of Michael Jackson. And what our investigation, turned up is that that's just not the case.
Right.
All the blame falling on his shoulders is not the reality of what actually killed Michael Jackson. There is a very, very complicated situation. You got to watch this because it's still it's not an enduring sort of mystery. We know what killed him, but what were the circumstances surrounding his death has really been shrouded in a lot of of mystery and misinformation. I think this really clears a lot up.
And the most telling part of this whole thing, and I think one of the things that Harvey really hits on throughout, is that the head of the investigative team, Orlando Martinez, the officer, said that it's really Conrad Murray was treated unfairly through the loss. Not that he didn't make mistakes,
right,
but the reason Michael Jackson was addicted to the cocktail of prescription drugs is because of the way he got injured in the Pepsi commercial where his head caught on fire, and then B, the years and years of drugs that he was introduced to by various physicians who just wanted to curry favor with him and gave him and got him hooked. And it was Conrad Murray who at the very least provided him with the lethal dose.
Look, he was the last guy watching. He became the scapegoat for the entire episode, and it actually is just sort of false. And this documentary does a lot to sort of clear that air a little bit.
Dr. Conrad Murray was convicted of killing Michael Jackson, but that's not the real story.
Who really killed Michael Jackson?
Doctors like Arnold Klein, who regularly plied patients with opioids.
People died. In some way, I was part of it. Give me a minute.
I will always love Michael.
There's a lot of folks to blame that have never had a reckoning.
TMZ Investigates Who Really Killed Michael Jackson, September 6th on Fox.
So fascinating stuff. Derek and I have seen it. It's really great work. I think they have a lot to be proud of, the folks who produced it. Anyway, thanks very much. We will not be here on Monday, right? We're taking Labor Day off. You doing
Happy
anything
Labor.
fun?
Yeah, I'm going up to the mountains.
Oh, me too.
Staying at a house. Oh, maybe I'll see you there.
No, where are you staying?
Lake Arrowhead.
Me too.
No, you're not.
Yeah.
Oh man, you want to come over our house?
No,
Are you really?
Yeah.
Oh, we have
No,
to talk about this offline.
We're actually not. All right. See you later.
Bye, everyone.